one of the big questions going into 2025 is the likelihood of Drake Maye still being the head coach of the Patriots going into next year. So where would you put that likelihood of Drake Maye coaching his last game here with the Patriots on Sunday?
Yeah, everything I'm hearing, Joe, is that Happy New Year to you too, and all of our viewers out there as well. Everything I'm hearing is that he's going to be back. That's the one thing that I think when all is said and done, unless this coming Sunday is a disaster and a disastrous way, which I don't know how many more disastrous ways you can have for this Patriots team with what they went through Saturday against the Chargers. But I think he's going to be back. Now, the difference will be, who joins him. I think you could take this discussion a lot of different ways. One for me would be to maybe bring some experience in with him, guys that have been there, done that. And, the term you and I go back to baseball a lot. When Theo Epstein was hired as general manager, he brought in a guy like Bill LaJoy, a veteran personnel man who had been around the game for a long time, just to bounce things off of. And I think, they have that within the system, but maybe somebody from the outside to kind of give them a fresh perspective too. So I think to me, the bottom line is going to be Drake Maye will be back. He'll get another chance, and then the organization will move forward from there.
All right, so let's build off of that right now, Dan. If there were changes to this coaching staff and it didn't involve replacing Drake Maye, where does it seem most likely that those changes are made?
I think when you look at it, it would be on the defensive side of the football. I think, what we've seen from the defense has been a surprise, put it that way, where you thought that the defense would get better and better. They always have under Bill Belichick. And granted, they lost Bill Belichick, they lost Steve Belichick, and they lost Drake Maye as a combination of kind of the de facto coordinators of this defense for many, many years. But they still had Mayo and DeMarcus Covington. It just didn't seem to work out. So it wouldn't surprise me if DeMarcus wasn't back, maybe some other members of that staff, and maybe there's some people that Drake Maye has an eye on, would like to bring in to help reinforce this defense and the defensive staff. Maybe it's an experienced defensive coordinator, maybe with, again, another fresh opinion from the outside. And a lot of that goes hand in hand with if you decide to bring back DeMarcus, if you don't decide to bring him back, what kind of changes happen with personnel, guys that fit the system? Because to me, one of the things that we saw, and it's been drilled into our head for the last 25 years, was do your job. And it looked like individually a lot of players weren't doing their job defensively, simple assignments and things like that. So it didn't create a defense of 11 collectively doing its job. So I think all that needs to be worked out in the offseason. So I think it would be the defensive side of the ball. A lot of people think Alex Van Pelt. Both coordinators may not be back. For one, I have a vote in for Alex Van Pelt. I think he's done everything you could want. I think he's learned as a play caller coming into this season. He hadn't had much experience doing it. I think he's learned as the season's gone on. And I think the development of Drake Maye was the first and foremost important thing in this franchise. I think he's done that pretty well. Me personally, I would bring him back. But I'm hearing that perhaps that may not be the case.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see after this final game comes to an end and then we hit the offseason. But you just brought up Drake Maye, Dan, and I want to hit on him for a moment because Drake Maye says if he's good to go, he will start this last game against Buffalo. What's the rationale behind that? Because a lot of fans are hoping that he doesn't start because if they lose this game, they get the #1 pick.
Yeah, and I think that's that's the only difference in this last game with your starting quarterback, right? If that was all decided, I don't think anybody would have a problem with Drake Maye starting this football game, right? You just want him to continue to get experience. You want him to continue to grow. You want to maybe see if he can deliver a last-minute victory with the team. We saw the heroic overtime effort, where he tied the game in regulation with that lengthy moving around the pocket scramble and everything else. But there's all kinds of situations that you still want to see and hopefully you can learn with. The one factor is that #1 pick. If they lose, they're going to be fourth, somewhere around there, third or fourth. So you're not worried too much about that. But I think the prospect of having the #1 overall pick and being able to do what you want with it is enticing to a lot of Patriots fans. And I talked to Jelani Tavai about this. And, he sat down with us for First Down last night on TV 38. And he was saying, I get it. It would be exciting to have the first-round pick around here. He goes, but I want to start my 2025 with a victory. And he goes, I want the rest of my team to start that way too. So you can see all sides of it here. And for Drake Maye, right hand injury, he's been banged up, from different things all season long. The concussion is the biggest concern for me. You don't want him to get concussed again because we've seen it a couple of times already this year. So maybe he comes in and plays a couple of series, a la Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills, which he's already doing that, so he can get his consecutive start streak. But there's more football for him. Maybe you just get him out 1, 2, 3, 4 series, ending somewhere on a good play, or maybe dropping the bucket, touchdown pass again to Booty, and then you take him out. Then you see what Joe Milton has. I think fans want to see how he's developed. So I think there's all kinds of factors that can play out in this one, Joe. But if it's me, if you're going to start him, get him out feeling good, and then bring in Joe Milton to see what he can do.
Yeah, a lot of people, I'm sure, would love to see Joe Milton out there on the field with that bazooka arm. But, Dan, you hit on Jelani Tavai and what he said to you on first down. What's been the mood among the players in the locker room leading up to this final game, considering how the season's gone?
I think it hasn't really changed. And the one thing I was talking to one of the players yesterday about is the fact that they've been pretty good, all year long. They've been consistent as far as, they come in, they work hard. Drake Maye mentioned this yesterday. He was proud of the fact that the guys never quit, never gave in, really. There were times during games where it looked like, you could kind of argue the other way, but that's human nature. But I think the mood has been the same. Come in, listen to our coaches, come up with a game plan, do our best to adapt to that game plan and get better. And I think that's kind of how they've all adapted it. So I think they're looking at the last game as, again, a player, I think it was Devon Godchaux, who said you have a chance to put down on your resume what you're going to be for next season. So they're still looking. There's evaluators out there that are watching from other teams. There's coaches and staff members here watching their players closely. Who wants it more? Who wants it most? Who's going to make a play? I've seen guys win a job in preseason, in the preseason finale. I've seen that over the course of time here in New England. So you never know what can happen. Maybe a guy comes up with a 2-interception day and gets himself a job. So there's plenty to still play for coming up here on Sunday against the Bills, even though it's expected to be a lot of their backups for a majority of the game.
Dan, you hit on the draft part of things for the Patriots, and that's what everybody's focusing on right now, considering the team is obviously out of the playoffs and they've had the season that they've had. How do you think the Patriots should go about it if they do get the number 1 pick and they lose this final game?
Well, if it's me, I think the 2 quarterbacks that we're hearing about coming out of the draft that I've seen a little bit of both, is Shedeur Sanders, who's got that arm for it. He's got a mobility. He's kind of like that Jaden Daniels type of quarterback. Shedeur Sanders out of the University of Colorado and Cam Ward out of the University of Miami looks to be like your top 2 quarterbacks, and that's it this year. So you want to find a team, whether it be 3 or 4 or 5, that wants to trade up into that number 1 spot to get either Sanders or to get Cam Ward. And then you can kind of figure it out. We're hearing, well, they won't get a haul. I'm not really concerned that much about a haul. Maybe you can find a team that has a tackle that you can try to pry out of them. Not necessarily, another draft pick. You certainly want that draft pick that they have, whether it be 3, 4, or 5. But then maybe you can get an offensive tackle that's not there in the draft or free agency. Maybe you can get a wide receiver out of them to add to your depth. And then at the very worst, add some picks. Maybe get, the 3 and then get a second rounder this year. And then maybe a future first rounder or something. You know what I mean? So there's different ways. So if you want that number 1 pick, because you control the draft. And then you have an opportunity to add more players to your team, better players to your team. And I think that's what anybody watching this team all season long, it's clear to see there's a talent deficit from the rest of the NFL. So now you want to accumulate players. That's the most important thing in important positions: the line, the defensive line, and the wide receiver position. Those are the things that you're looking for, at least in my mind, as you try to get that number 1 pick.
And it's going to be a big draft for Elliott Wolf if he is the man that will make those picks, considering this last draft outside of Drake Maye not a whole lot to show for, Dan. Before we let you go, I'm going to throw a quick curveball at you right before we let you go, Dan. You are a man of positivity, and everybody in this region knows that. You are somebody that brings a lot of positivity to this area, which is much needed. What's your favorite moment in terms of covering this team this year that Patriots fans can really smile about going into next year? And I'll make it a little bit hard for you outside of Drake Maye.
No, I can't. No, I was just going to go back to that overtime, forcing overtime. Where was it against Tennessee? Yeah. Where down in Nashville, we're all in the press box, like, wow. And even members of the Tennessee media, national media, where he held the ball and scrambled around to the pocket for like a ridiculous amount of time before finally finding Ramondre Stevenson for the game-tying touchdown to send it to overtime. That, to me, was your signature moment of the 2024 New England Patriots season. To see that play, you were like, they have something here. You know, we've seen that with Jaden Daniels in Washington. He's been winning games, and that's what you want next for Drake Maye. You want to, as he says, he just wants to get a better foundation here of players. He's got the foundation as a starting quarterback. Now get some players in here, be a playoff contender, and go from there. But there's no question in my mind that was the signature moment. The other part is Brendan Schooler was named Pro Bowler this morning for the Patriots. Congrats to him taking in the, kind of following the footsteps of Matthew Slater, the great one, who was somewhere around a 10-time Pro Bowler. Him blocking a field goal in a critical situation. That was another big play that stood out to me. And every time there seemed to be a big tackle on special teams, it was provided by Schooler. He also had the Longhorn package on defense where he got a quarterback sack. That was pretty cool as well. So maybe those are some of the signature moments you've had with this football team. And then the drop in the bucket, Kayshon Boutte catching one against Miami and then one against the Buffalo Bills. The beautiful throw, the beautiful catch. Those are some of the highlights of this season. So it's been tough. But again, you know what? Hey, it happens. As teams win and lose in the NFL, now you're hoping the Patriots can build off this season and get better and better as they go. But there's been enough highlights to make it entertaining and fun to cover this football team.
Yeah, and hopefully we have more highlights to talk about going into 2025, and this team can make a jump in the wins category, and we'll see what they do on draft night. But, of course, last game coming up on Sunday. Dan, appreciate the time as always, and thanks for your great coverage all year.
Always a pleasure, Joe. Talk to you soon.
All righty, and Friday nights mean all access here on WBZ. We'll go one-on-one with Drake Maye and take you behind the scenes in Foxborough. That's coming up tomorrow night at 7. And we've got you covered all day Sunday, starting with Patriots game day at 11:30 here on WBZ and streaming on CBS News Boston. The Pats and Bills kick off at 1 right here on WBZ, and the fifth quarter post-game show will be on TV 38 right after the game.